He had always been the one they laughed at, the one they mocked, the one whose name was never called during honors or awards. From childhood, Raymond was the shadow among stars. Born in a small rural town surrounded by fields of struggle and whispers of unrealized dreams, he bore the weight of expectations that were never truly his. His father, a retired janitor with tired hands, used to say, "Son, we don't have the luxury of dreams, we survive." Raymond believed that for a long time. In school, his grades staggered just above failure, and in sports he was the last picked, his presence tolerated more than welcomed. At 17, he barely graduated high school, and when he enlisted in the military, it was seen as a final resort, not an ambition. Even his own family pitied him more than they believed in him. The day he left for basic training, his mother gave him a lukewarm hug and whispered, "Just stay out of trouble." No one ever thought he would last. And for a while, it seemed, they were right. He failed his first weapons qualification, his physical scores were abysmal, and during team exercises, he was often blamed for slowing others down. His drill sergeant once barked, "You're not even good enough to fail right." His bunkmates avoided eye contact with him as though failure was contagious. And yet, something in Raymond refused to break. It wasn't pride or anger, it was something quieter, a resolve buried deep beneath the layers of rejection and ridicule. Every night, while others slept, he stayed up reading manuals, replaying drills in his head. He ran extra laps, did extra push-ups, and studied like his life depended on it. He started asking questions, seeking mentorship, volunteering for duties no one else wanted. Slowly, something began to shift. Not outwardly at first, but inwardly. His endurance improved, his focus sharpened, and one day he surprised everyone by ranking third in a tactical simulation exercise. The instructors looked at him differently now, not with respect, but with curiosity. This wasn't the Raymond they knew. Something was happening. Months passed, and Raymond graduated from basic training not with honors, but with grit. He was assigned to a modest infantry unit stationed overseas. It was not glamorous, nor was it easy. But he arrived with a different mindset. Unlike others who boasted or complained, Raymond observed, listened, and learned. He watched how leaders operated, how decisions were made, how small actions built or eroded trust. He wrote everything down in a journal he kept hidden in his duffel. His unit faced brutal terrain, punishing climates, and moments of terrifying uncertainty, but Raymond remained steady. During one mission in a conflict-prone zone, their convoy was ambushed. Chaos erupted, and the ranking officer froze under pressure. Raymond, acting on instinct and everything he'd studied, took charge. He reorganized the unit's position, identified a flank path, and coordinated suppressing fire that allowed his team to retreat safely with minimal injuries. His leadership in that moment was undeniable. The debriefing officer noted, "You saved lives today." That wasn't luck. That was clarity. From that point on, Raymond's name began circulating among the ranks, not as the failure from boot camp but as the calm under fire. Promotions followed, but so did pressure. The higher he climbed, the more enemies he made not just in combat but politically. Some officers disliked his ascent, labeling him unqualified, unconventional, or worse, lucky. But Raymond remained focused. He developed his own leadership style, firm but empathetically listened to his subordinates, advocated for his troops, and introduced changes that improved morale and efficiency. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was shaping the system that once rejected him. One of his men once said, "Sir, we'd walk through hell for you not because you're a general, but because you walked through it first for us." Despite his growing reputation, Raymond never forgot where he came from. He returned to his hometown in uniform for the first time during his mid-level promotion ceremony. The town barely recognized him. Former classmates stared with disbelief, and his own parents wept in silence. But Raymond didn't visit out of pride. He came to speak at the same high school that had once dismissed him. Standing on that stage, in front of students who looked at him with awe, he said, "I was told I would never amount to anything. I failed more times than I can count. But failure is not the end. It's the instruction manual for success." The speech went viral. Videos circulated. News outlets picked it up. Suddenly, Raymond wasn't just a military man, he was a symbol. But fame came with scrutiny. Critics began digging into his past, looking for scandals, for shortcuts, for skeletons. Some claimed he wasn't battle-tested enough. Others tried to paint him as a media creation. Raymond remained silent publicly, but privately, he documented every encounter. every manipulation, and every attempt to drag him down. He wasn't bitter, just prepared. The next big test came during an international crisis where he was assigned to oversee a joint operation between conflicting nations. Mistrust, political posturing, and sabotage plagued the mission. Yet, it was Raymond's tactful diplomacy, combined with his hands-on approach, that neutralized tensions and saved thousands of lives. His strategy was so unorthodox that analysts struggled to categorize it, but results spoke louder than tradition. Raymond returned home to a hero's welcome, but more importantly, he had earned the silent nods of approval from skeptics who once doubted his worth. Then came the day no one expected. A top-ranking general was removed amid scandal, and the president needed a fast. Raymond's name was recommended, but the backlash was immediate. He's not from the right background, critics said. He's too young, others claimed. A live debate ensued on national television. Pundits, political figures, even veterans weighed in. But the most powerful voice came not from a politician or soldier, but from a young woman whose life Raymond had saved during a rescue mission years ago. She told her story, tearfully recalling how Raymond had risked his own safety to evacuate her village during an airstrike. He's not just a general, she said. He's a protector of life. The public began to rally. Hashtags emerged. Petitions circulated. Eventually, the president made the call. Raymond was promoted to general, breaking multiple precedents. But his first speech after the promotion wasn't celebratory, it was reflective. I failed, he said, not once, not twice, but countless times. I was humiliated, underestimated, ignored. But none of that defines me. What defines me is what I chose to do after the world gave up on me? The hall erupted in applause. Raymond, the boy who couldn't pass his physical, was now the nation's youngest and most respected general, yet he still kept his old dog tags, the ones from the days of failure, as a reminder. General Raymond's tenure began with turbulence. The military was in flux, budget cuts, political oversight, internal rivalries, and an exhausted force recovering from years of high-intensity operations. Many expected him to buckle under the weight. But Raymond approached it with his signature style. Not from above, but from among. He didn't hide behind polished desks or avoid uncomfortable truths. He visited forward operating bases without warning, shared meals with enlisted troops, listened to complaints without filtering, and made personal notes. His strategy was simple but radical: reform from the ground up. He slashed outdated bureaucracies, implemented mental health programs for returning veterans, and launched leadership training that emphasized ethics and empathy alongside discipline and strategy. There were fierce battles in the war rooms of politics too. Members of the Defense Committee resisted his changes, accusing him of being too sentimental for command. A smear campaign erupted, allegations of favoritism, doctored service records, even conspiracies about how he'd risen so fast. Raymond stayed silent at first, refusing to get distracted by the noise. But during a high-stakes congressional hearing broadcast live, he stood and calmly dismantled each accusation with facts, dates, names, and evidence. You may question my path, he concluded, but not my results, and certainly not the sacrifices of those I've led. The room fell silent. Even his harshest critics found no words. After the hearing, a senior senator told him, "You just rewrote the manual on leadership." But Raymond wasn't driven by praise. Late at night, he still read military history, still trained, still asked questions. He knew storms would come. He wasn't afraid of storms, he had been forged in them. One of his aides once remarked, "He leads like a soldier, thinks like a scholar, and endures like a ghost." As Raymond's reputation grew, so did the dangers. He began receiving anonymous threats, some from foreign enemies, others, shockingly, from within. Not everyone liked change, and many had made fortunes or careers off the old, broken systems. One day, during a routine base inspection, his convoy was ambushed again, not in a war zone, but on home soil. The attack was swift, professional, and chilling. 3 of his guards were injured, and 1 was killed. Investigations revealed it wasn't a random act of terror but a coordinated attempt on his life. The betrayal shook him. These weren't just enemies, they were insiders. Still recovering from the emotional blow, Raymond addressed his staff the next morning. "If they think this will break us, they don't understand who we are. We don't just fight battles, we rise from them." Security was heightened, but Raymond refused to be paralyzed by fear. He returned to duty with even greater resolve. The attack, instead of weakening his position, rallied support. Soldiers, veterans, and citizens sent letters, emails, and videos, voicing their allegiance. Across the country, murals of Raymond appeared. A film studio approached him for his life rights, but he declined. "This story isn't about me," he told them. "It's about what's possible when failure stops being the final chapter." But the real storm was still coming. An international conflict loomed on the horizon, two superpowers inching closer to confrontation over disputed territory. The world watched as diplomacy faltered and alliances fractured. War seemed inevitable. That's when the president called upon Raymond once more, not just to command forces, but to attempt the impossible: prevent the war entirely. The world doubted, allies hesitated, and insiders whispered of doom. But Raymond boarded the diplomatic flight alone, carrying not weapons, but words. The talks took place on neutral ground, cold, tense, and riddled with suspicion. Cameras were banned. Every word was transcribed. Raymond sat across from generals and leaders who had never known failure, men who were born into command, trained in elitism. But Raymond spoke plainly, with stories, not slogans. He recounted the lives lost unnecessarily in past conflicts, the grieving mothers, the amputee soldiers, the children who never knew peace. At first, his words were dismissed as sentimental. One foreign minister sneered, "You talk like a poet, not a warrior." Raymond responded calmly, "A real warrior knows when to put down the sword." Over the next 72 hours, something shifted. His presence unsettled them, not because of threats, but because of his honesty. He admitted mistakes. He acknowledged pain. And then he offered a new framework for peace, an unprecedented treaty built not on dominance, but mutual restoration. He proposed military transparency, economic rebuilding zones, and joint humanitarian efforts. Most believed it would be rejected outright, but to the world's shock, the rival leaders agreed to the terms in principle. The media exploded. Analysts were stunned. "This isn't just diplomacy," one headline read. "It's evolution." Raymond returned to a hero's welcome once again, but he avoided parades. "Peace is not a trophy," he said. "It's a garden. It needs work every day." That night, alone in his office, he opened his old journal, the one from his early days, and wrote, "I used to pray for people to believe in me. Now I realize I had to become the one who never stopped believing." He closed the book and sat silently, unaware that thousands of miles away, school children were being taught a new chapter titled simply, "Raymond, the General Who Failed First." Years later, after his retirement, Raymond declined the usual post-career privileges: no consulting deals, no book tours, no presidential bids. He bought a small home near the town where it all began. He opened a free leadership camp for troubled youth, many of whom had been labeled failures. He'd spend hours with them, hiking, talking, listening, teaching them how to lead from within. Occasionally, they'd ask, "Sir, were you ever scared?" He always smiled and said, "Every day. But fear is just a door. Walk through it, and you find your future." When he passed away quietly in his sleep, years later, the world mourned. The military held a memorial attended by global leaders, and tributes flooded in. His original dog tags were displayed in the National Museum with a single inscription: "He turned failure into foundation." But perhaps the most touching moment came from a soldier, once a gang member saved by Raymond's youth camp, who stood before millions and whispered, "He gave me a reason to exist." Raymond's story became legend, not because he won every battle, but because he lost with dignity and rose with purpose. From failure to general wasn't just his journey, it became a roadmap for countless others. And in classrooms, barracks, war rooms, and quiet bedrooms where someone doubts themselves, the story is still whispered, like a prayer: fall, rise, lead.